This is the I Heart My Life show. Welcome to the I Heart My Life show. I have such an amazing episode for you today. We have the incredible Suzie Cuthbertson here with us. She's somebody who I've gotten to know over the last few months. And honestly, she's someone I admire so much. She is the confidant working with 1% leaders and focused on emotional and energetic mastery with shadow work integration. Now, if you have no idea what that means, we're going to dive into it today. But honestly, she is somebody who's just like a magician at helping people make things happen through all of the internal work that she helps them do to create those outward results. So we're going to dive into all of that today. So welcome, Suzie. So excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited about this.
Yeah. So Suzie and I know each other through a peer mastermind that I lead, and she joined a few months ago. And I have to say, Suzie, I always look forward to all of your messages and all of your updates because I'm always just in awe of you and the work that you do in the world. And you're somebody who I've actually referenced on the show and in multiple emails to my community because you are the person who told me that you don't do boxes and you're not going to put yourself into a box. And there's no reason for all of us to do that. And so just in hearing you say that, it completely changed my life because I felt like I was trying to fit myself into this mold. So I know we're going to cover that today, but I just wanted to start with that because I know so many people listening feel boxed in. They feel like they have to choose. They can't be their full selves. So I know today you're going to give all of us permission to just go for it and to step into the soul work that we're here to do on this planet.
Emily, can I just say that's the first time that I've heard that from you, and I feel literally I've got tingles and I feel really moved. So thank you, because I had no idea.
Welcome. Yeah, no, it's amazing. So take us back. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey to the work that you do today.
So I was thinking about this and reflecting on this today. So I started this work at the young years of my life. Like I started this work, and I hadn't realized this very early on, where I not just help people in terms of their leadership and with shadow integration, I also am very intuitive. And so I think where this stemmed from was I opened up something within me when I was young, and it was almost like an intuitive channel where I could download and sense things and feel things. And actually that served me up until the point where I went into corporate. And so my journey, when I think about this, actually started then, my tuning in and to like the sixth sense. And then as I kind of went up the corporate ladder, like most people do, I used that as a superpower, which I didn't know at the time. I had no idea that that was why I was getting kind of the results that I was getting with my teams and things. And then as I climbed the corporate ladder higher and higher and higher, like most of us do, I burnt myself out and things got really serious. And so I had been coaching for about 2 decades. I was the point where it got really serious. I was actually a HR director and a shareholder. And so I was using all these skills. And actually, can I just say, I loved what I did. And I still to this day loved what I did. The job actually wasn't the issue. The issue was me. And by the way, the issue is always all of us. So I hate to cut to the chase on this one. And so I got really, as far as I could at that point. My fun had dried up. My life had dried up. I was really anxious. I'd had an actual nervous breakdown. I think we talk about burning out and we band it around a lot, but actually what we're doing is breaking our cellular system down. And so that had collapsed. My soul was basically really angry and like telling me to like look this way, and I kept looking the other way. And I then got to the point where I literally just timed out. I timed out of that. And so my journey of coaching started 2 decades ago. I'm a qualified mediator, and I learned to kind of mediate. And actually what I started to do when I came out of the corporate world was start mediating with my soul. And I actually was using that skill to mediate with a lot of my clients' souls too. And so I came out of corporate, went into the online world. I wanted to help people transform. I'd had this massive epiphany. My life had changed. I'd done a lot of inner work, and I just really had a mission to help other people with this. And so that's it. That's kind of where I started off in the online world and started coaching and mentoring. But actually that grew. It grew out of just kind of one-to-one into training. So I had a training institute where it was training people to be coaches. And then another business was born. So I'm definitely a serial entrepreneur as well, which is why I say we don't fit into boxes, because I don't see myself as a coach. And so the third business was born, and then things started to get heavy again.
I'm so interested in the first part of this story because we talked about burnout a lot on this show. And
Yeah.
so I'm really curious about your perspective. You said burnout, has to do with you and what was going on internally. So what was it that you think was the catalyst or the reason for the burnout?
So this is where I love getting deep with people. We think burnout is external to us, right? It's all the external things that are happening to us. It's the work pressure, it's the person, it's the overtime, it's the hours, it's the responsibility, it's the fact that I can't balance home life. And actually, it is, because obviously these are the things that apply the pressure. But who's in charge of the pressure gauge? Who's actually fundamentally in charge of the gauge? We are. We are. And the inability to see that, and I definitely did not see this because it was everybody else's fault. And I'm not one to point fingers, but in my moment of victim, it was everyone else's fault. And so we lose our power. We lose the sense of connection with ourselves and understand that actually we get to say when, we get to say who, we choose. And actually what I find is most of us, we get so far up a rung that we build the incredible things around us, and we are worried that those things are going to get taken away from us if we stop with our current, kind of patterns, behaviors, cycles. So we keep going and we burn ourselves out to keep these things around us. And actually what we should be really looking at is the internal environment, not the external environment. And most people I know that have gone on this journey have blamed all of the things that we've said, but it's not until we take responsibility of the fact that nobody made me do the extra overtime. Like, nobody did. Nobody made me serve more. That was a childhood trait. That was something, it was much deeper than that. It's psychological needs that potentially we are living out in our adult life that weren't met in our childhood. And that is what is actually burning us out. And I had no idea that all of this was going on underneath the surface. And what I find happens with most people that burn out is it's our body's way of just asking us to repair what happened in the past. And I know most people will understand what I mean by that, because when I flew through my 20s, I had the time of my life and I was really successful. And I got to my 30s and all of a sudden things started to grind a bit more. And it was almost like my memory, my cellular activity in my body was remembering the past and some things that happened in the past that, by the way, I had to go deal with. And I had no idea that I had to go deal with them until kind of the brakes were getting applied. And I blamed it on the job and the this and the that and the seriousness and the heaviness. But who made me serious? Who made me heavy? It was my shadows. It was like my shadows literally just coming in to play, like the anxiety. It was the meaning that I was making about everything. It was the things I was telling myself internally. Like, if I have my notes in, this will happen. If I do this, this will happen. And it's all these stories and narratives and lies that we tell ourselves to keep ourselves in the box. And the box is an illusion of the mind. It's our shadow's way of keeping us safe, believe it or not. And actually, until I work that out, even though, a couple of years on, I was free from the job and blah, 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 I still wasn't free. And so now I kind of do this work with other people to help them hold more, open up their capacity to be able to hold more, because people say they want to have it all, but what they don't want to have it all, they want to be able to hold it all. That's it. Like, you can have all you want, but if you can't hold it, it means nothing. And so that's really my mission.
Wow, I love that differentiating factor. That's so cool. So when you talk about the shadow work, what were some of the shadows that came up for you that you got to process and deal with? And I'm asking this because I think it's really important that we recognize that you most likely had the opportunity to go from the job into something else, which for you was the business. And a lot of people, when they're looking at the external, if they think it's the job's fault, then they're going to recreate the same thing when they go into the business because it's not the job's fault. So what were the shadow pieces that you were looking at or that you identified that you got to work with and kind of navigate through before you started the business?
So I didn't do it before I started the business, which was really unfortunate, because what I did was, at that time where I left, I still obviously thought it was the job.
Yeah.
So I brought all of that baggage online with me, and pretty much for the first year and a half really struggled. Like, wobbling all over the place, not understanding, like, why is nothing different? Like, different as in, yeah, I had freedom,
Yeah.
as in my freedom, my calendar, but I didn't have the freedom that I thought, which was going to be the sense of mind or the peace and the relaxation. Because if you pick up your personality traits and you just bring them, to the house
Right.
next door, like, you're literally just moving house, but bringing all the same furniture with you. So I literally was like, oh my God. And it was literally about that point where I realized I didn't really have a team at that point either in my business. So I was spending, as we all do, a lot of time in my head, a lot of time on my own. And actually things started to get progressively worse. And so I realized I needed to sort this out. And can I just say the usual cognitive kind of coaching, like pure coaching as we call it, just wasn't cutting the mustard. It wasn't touching the surface. And I thought, I'm going to need deeper work than this. And actually that's when I came across shadow work, and I've trained in shadow work. And I also have just, oh my God, spent so much time researching it, but now I pioneer my own tools, because the piece around shadow work is that it's somatic. It helps you with your memory. So it's cognitive, and it's taking you also very deeply into the soul. So there's a real spiritual element with this as well. And the key one that I found, one of the archetypes that I really found that I had no idea that existed within me. And I'm a woman of ego. So when I found this out, I was refusing to believe that this could be me. But one of our archetypes is the prostitute. And she overgives to everyone. And I'm like, I never overgive. I'm really boundaried. And it's like, are you? And then we looked at the boundary, and it's very black and white, the boundary. But then within that, there was all this leaky energy going out. And, she puts everybody else's values ahead of her own. Well, if I was being really honest, I did that my whole life in corporate. She prioritizes everyone else's needs around her apart from her own. She literally will do everything it takes to appease others. And so these are parts of, shadow archetypes. We all have this, by the way. We all have parts of this. Some of ours are deeper than others. And so I had to really look in the mirror. And that is probably one of the most confrontational pieces around this work, because that was hard. But you build a resilience and a strength for it. And, I healed through that process, made amends for that. I owned it. I own the fact that, yeah, I do this and I love it. And it's almost like this. I don't know if you've read Eliot's Kinky Bitch, which is all about shadow work. And he's actually claiming the bits that are really weird and wacky. And that you're like, but why would I like this? And the more you say it and the more you neutralize it, and the more it just becomes part of who you are. And you also get to heal aspects where you're like, well, actually, I am that and I've always been that, but I don't want to be that anymore. I don't want to be that person responsible for everyone else. I don't want to be that person holding the weight for everyone else. I don't want to be that person because I don't want to be that person for my son. And actually what it came to was my son, because I want him to know that he doesn't have to do this to get what he needs in life or wants, because it's something we're trained at from a young age, and we're conformed to a society, and we see other people doing this. And actually it needn't be like that anymore. So I really feel like that archetype was a key one for me. And also there was the victim, where I knew about the victim and I knew about the warrior, which is like the alchemy to it. I was very much in my warrior, and I was very aligned with everything I was doing. And I had slipped somehow over the years from pain and discomfort and, really bending over backwards, as I say, into this victim. But you would never hear me complain. I'm not a complainer. Most women I know, we're not complainers. We do it in silence, which is kind of the worst part, because we're eroding internally without even understanding. And so I really felt like these were the key things that massively accelerated my ability to hold more, be more, and own who I am, because it is who I am. And we are all magnificent. We've all got complex stories and complex upbringings and everything else. And we defied all odds, is what I think. And so we should celebrate that.
I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Before we get back to the interview, I wanted to share a little something I think you'll find valuable. If you're looking for more clarity on what you want in life, or feel like something is holding you back, I've created a free Dream Life Guide just for you. It's a step-by-step resource to help you get clear on your goals and break through any mindset blocks that might be in the way. You can grab it at iheartmylife.com/guide. And as a bonus, I've also included a private podcast feed to go along with the guide to give you even more value and support. So head over to iheartmylife.com/guide to download it for free. All right, now back to the conversation. So, for anyone listening who is new to shadow work, can you talk about the different archetypes or whatever the phrase is? So, you mentioned the prostitute. So, you mentioned the warrior. What are some of the other ones?
So you've got the child who is very much stamping their feet, getting annoyed, blaming everyone, thinking that, it's all right for her. It's okay that she's got that. So we can switch in and out of that. We've got sovereign, which is our queen, is our kind of ruler, our leader, who says the boundaries, who says when, who's really firm, who is empowered, who does her best for herself, but knows she's doing her best for humanity. You've got the lover who alchemizes the prostitute, because actually that woman who's bent over backwards for you is incredible, by the way. Like, the things that she has done for us. And therefore the lover just comes in and just says, listen, it's all okay. It's okay. You didn't need to disown yourself, and you definitely didn't need to do this to yourself. And so we switch in and out of these all day long. These are just, subconscious areas of our psyche. That is Carl Jung's work. If anyone isn't aware of this, incredible. He kind of was good friends with Sigmund Freud. They had different teachings and different views, but this work is revolutionary because it really does get us to look at the darker elements, so that we can illuminate the brighter parts of us, and also own the darker parts that actually they've been placed there for a reason. Things happen for a reason. And as long as we're learning the lessons from them, then actually how incredible that we can evolve ourselves and evolve everyone else around us. And the one thing I'll say about anyone, if you are listening and you haven't heard of shadow work before, there's archetypes, and a lot of people think we go to war with our shadows when we do this work. There is a school of thought that is all like, cut it off. And you absolutely don't cut it off. You absolutely heal, grow, and start to own those elements, because you try cut something off, you try cut a child off, then it's not happening. They're not going anywhere. They're going to keep coming back. So that is why this work is just so powerful.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I understood that from what you were saying. And I wanted to make sure to reiterate that, because we've said many times on this show, whatever we resist persists. And so it's not about that. It's about the integration and the looking at it, and also looking at it with love and acceptance. And I love that. And so I'm really big on timelines. I'm curious to know, I know that this work is never done, but the initial sort of deep dive for you, how long did that take for you to really start to see a transformation and also see it reflected in your business and in your work?
Honestly, it was pretty rapid. When you show someone a mirror that they have never seen before, like a completely different perspective on them, who they are, and when we start owning that relationship and that responsibility, by the way, we abdicate our responsibility for our relationship with ourselves, I don't know at what point in our timeline. And so when we come back to taking responsibility, it can be literally rapid. And so the changes I saw were rapid. And I see that also with my clients, because it's like you just looking at life and yourself with a completely different lens. And because we're working not just the mind, we're working beyond the mind, it's sustainable. So what I would find with a lot of coaching is I do the cut and I go off and I'd be like, yeah, that's great, woo. And then I'd be like, oh, but I didn't feel a difference. And actually I've forgotten half of what I said. With this, it's felt. It's literally cellular. It's really powerful. And so when you are faced with having to view yourself from all these different angles, and because there's all these different, I'm going to say archetypes play, but it's not just that, our without even mentioning archetypes, just even the suppression parts of our soul that I work with clients, the desires that you're suppressing because of the stories in this, just that can be absolutely life-changing. So in a timeline for my business, I would say definitely within 6 months, the whole thing was just revolutionized. But it wasn't the business as we know, it was me. And we are the business, and everything that flows for us energetically is what the world sees. So if we are in that seat and we're not flowing right, and it isn't coming from a place of, I'm going to say, authenticity, where we're not owning what we're doing or how we do it or who we're being, then that is felt. So I feel like the ripples of that was felt immediately. But then my infrastructure changed. I changed up team. I realized I didn't have to do things from guilt and obligation. I was like, oh my God, I get to make this part of my chapter up. Like, And even though I believed that before, subconsciously, I was being pulled back down by all these other parts.
So amazing. And so, where in the timeline was that? What year would you say you started to do that work and see the transformation?
That work started to come off the back of the pandemic. So I'd say like 2021, not during the pandemic, after it. I think everyone else went through their growth spurts during the pandemic. And I was like,
Yeah.
wait till afterwards because I just had a baby. And so 2021, I really started to seriously get into shadow work. And I remember having my best financial year. Everything, just all the indicators were like up, 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 up. But for the first time ever, they weren't coming from a need.
It was different.
It was different. And at the same time, I started to really go deep into like my spiritual work because I realized actually this is about legacy now. This is not about anything other. I haven't come this far now to recreate. And so I would really say from that year onwards, everything started to open up.
I love that. And the other reason I'm asking this is because I know part of your story, and there was a point where you started to do things in a different way and operate from a different space. And funnily enough, when we were texting, I saw that you said, at 23, everything started to shift, not for the better. And I thought you meant 23 years old. So we had this little funny moment, but you were talking about 2023. So bring us to that point and talk a little bit about what started to shift there and what you experienced.
So 2021, everything going fabulous, 21, 22, going into 23. And then life happened. So I had a couple of losses. So people that I'd lost that were very close to me. One very close. And I just had a shock in my system because it literally came out of nowhere and I did not see it coming. And I've experienced loss before, but for whatever reason, it felt different in my system at this point. I then had opened up at this point three businesses. And actually, I was starting to feel the pressure again. One of them was doing really well, but what was going in was coming back out again. And I felt like there was just this loss of control once more. And actually, when you do this work, and I know people listening, if you do this work, you'll understand, you almost kind of kick yourself even harder because you're like, but I should know this. I do this for a living. Like, I do this work. I do this with people. How did I not see this coming? And there was like poor decisions. I felt like I'd fell out of my artistry. And that was from listening to too many people around what I should do or how I should be seen. And that resulted in me literally going into like this state of like frozen, of not wanting to put a foot forward because I was like, now I'm not sure what version I should be showing. And actually, what I was showing before was all of me. And so why did I not keep going with that? Well, actually, what happened was all these things were happening in their life. So started to like one thing after another, emotional, pushed to the test. I nearly lost both my parents as well in that year. I had to take a lot of time out. I'd said goodbye to my mother. We can have another episode on the miracle of her, by the way. But anyway, and so all of that started to filter into my business. And we think we're separate, but we're not. And that made me wobbly around who I was being and who I am. And then the choice decisions around what I chose to, I'm going to say with my artistry, deliver. Because actually I had gone through a pioneering stage in both businesses. I was putting tools out there that nobody had spoke about. I was working with people on shadow work. And I was told to make it more basic, make it more mainstream. And I'm not going to go into the who's, the where's, the what's, Emily. And that's when 2023 really just kind of collapsed on me because I was like, I don't know how to be basic. I don't know how to be mainstream. I don't want to be basic. And it was almost like everything that I'd worked towards that had done and made me successful, my shadow started to come in again, picking apart, saying, well, maybe you should. And maybe you should do it this way, like someone else. And can I just say, I saw my senses, like, thank God, because that is not where I am now. But 2023 was the year I stopped dreaming. It was the year I put my artistry on hold. It was the year I really started to go into kind of a survival mode. My whole nervous system I'm trying to like save everyone from outside, like literally. And so everything kind of came to a halt. I say to people, it was the year I grounded myself.
Thank you for sharing that so vulnerably. And I think it is super interesting because as you grow, you build your business, you obviously want to have more support. That means there's more voices, there's more noise oftentimes, there's more people that we're turning to for
Uh,
feedback and all of that. And, sometimes that's a good thing, but sometimes it also means that we lose ourselves a little bit or we take guidance that isn't actually aligned. And so I'm curious to know, hindsight is 2020. When you look back, was there a feeling in the pit of your stomach saying this isn't right? Was there, something that was an indicator for you that you ignored that we can highlight so that other people in a similar situation can see, hey, I might need to pivot here, make a different decision?
so I think there were so many red flags. There were so many warning signs. There was so many stomach flips. And so for me, because I'm very intuitive, I will feel normally it'll be my heart space or it'll be my stomach. During that period where I was like, this is off, this isn't right. I'm going to tell you the key to this year was we had outsourced a lot, a lot. So we paid a lot. And because of the risk that we took with the outsourcing, there was so much at risk. It was almost like, well, no, I'll just keep it going. Just
Right.
leave.
The sunk cost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Just no, just
Hmm.
well, let's keep going with this. This person's probably not giving me the right advice, but I'm just going to keep going with this because I've already paid a fortune. I'm just going to keep going with this. And I love the sunk cost theory because for me, it's funny because I had a whole career in this and I built this and I was a shareholder, but I still chose the risks now to my health are like way too much. So therefore I'm getting out. So sunken costs of 16 years or not, I'm coming out. And yet this only happened over 12 months. This is the thing. It was only 12-month journey, but yet was significantly because I didn't pull out when I knew to because of the sunken costs and the outsourcing and the time, effort and energy. So kind of a pivoted direction. And actually my whole body was saying, no, just turn back that way. Just literally just look over there, look right there. There's this other parallel universe for you where you're doing all this crazy stuff and people do listen. Or there's this place over here where it's really boring and it's really vanilla and you're going to have to conform and there's a box. And actually, when you've got 3 or 4 advisors on your team telling you to do that, that basically, that was what was happening. So I had the niggles, I had the feelings, and then I actually got to a point where I was like, this is just mental. Oh my God, where did I go for 12 months? But can I just say to any listeners, where you go to is wherever your body needs to survive. And that's okay. Because actually I had a lot of healing with that I couldn't believe that had happened to me. I've already lost myself once. Why would I do that to myself again? And so when we are hit with a vulnerable period of time in our lives, like, losing people, grieving, shock, all these emotions in our system, like that's actually the thing we should be focusing on. If I'd have outsourced to someone to help me with that and not all that other stuff in my business, I guarantee you that year wouldn't have looked like that. But actually, I thought I needed strategy and marketing and a new positioning when actually what I really needed was to deal with all of the stuff because our shadows will come out when we're most vulnerable and our
Wow.
shadows will put us off scent. And when we're off scent, we get lost in the forest and then we start to self-abandon. And so I look back at that year as such a gift because funny enough, what am I doing this year is helping so many incredible people doing this for themselves. And instead of the strategy and this and everything else, what they're finding is their power and
Mm,
that, their pivots are coming from within in this place that is seeing them. And we talked about this before, 10xing. So that,
yeah.
they're building.
Yeah.
Emily, I can see you're a bit,
Wow.
are you a bit tearful?
Yeah. So I literally cry on this show like every episode. So don't
Oh,
worry. But what you said totally landed for me because I've actually talked to people about this a lot recently because everything that happened in my business with my program imploding and the legal stuff happened when I was like 6 weeks pregnant. And I was just thinking about like how vulnerable I was at that time. And I love that you just highlighted that the tendency is, well, I'm going to go outward and get all the people to help me with the business because I need to just take care of myself. And, that will help me offload things and then I won't have to think about it, blah, blah, blah. But like you're saying, we need to go inward. And that's when we need to hire the healers and do the shadow work and take care of ourselves and have that extra support and nourishment. And so I just love that so much. And it really lands for me because I think I did some of that, but equally, I think I was just like so confused as to what trigger to pull, for lack of a better phrase. And just like, I just got to survive, like going into survival mode. Right. And it can be very confusing to know what to do. And so I'm so glad that you've just like illustrated this for us and given people permission to get the nourishment and the internal support first and foremost during those times.
Yeah, I feel like when we are vulnerable, we outsource and we outsource our power. And so we just have to have a check on, am I doing this from a place of empowerment or disempowerment? And the answer, if I'd asked myself, would have been disempowerment every single time, but we don't because we think we're being empowered making this big decision. And actually, what we're saying is, I need help. That's what I need is help. I don't need this other stuff. And so define exactly where you need the help. What are you actually really struggling with, honestly, and get the help there over all the other shiny things that we think we need. You know, the biggest thing that drove ROI into my business and into my life has been the ability to do this work. Everything else is just noise. Because since I did that and since, I continue to do that, it's evolution. The work's never done, Emily. You know this. Like this is,
Hmm.
I'll continue this, until I'm not here. That for me is like the ROI because I've got a tool now that I can keep forever. And even when the vulnerability comes out and the shadows do come in, I've also got something to be able to kind of to alchemize that. And so I'm grateful that I came home, but I had to do it on my own. I think that's the key thing. And you know this because there's so much heartache there can be, can't there? Building your dreams. By the way, building your dreams takes courage. It takes bravery and you're going to have to take some risks. And so I'm just glad that I found myself because she was really lost and she's come back much stronger.
And would you say that one of the things that could help people when they're making decisions about outsourcing is finding people or team members or support that makes you feel more like you?
Yeah. I feel like whenever I recruit now or look for anyone, and it's funny, I did this before, which is why I had award-winning teams. I always look for people that owned it. Like, I never wanted a clone of me. I never wanted anyone to be nodding at me.
Yeah.
I got no joy out of that because I just found that dull. My brain wasn't being
Yeah.
stimulated. And so when I look for someone now, I look for, do you have the things that obviously I don't have? And actually, as a human being, are you owning who you are? Because that point of differentiation for me is so important on this journey because when you're in a room with people that are owning it, it's hard for you to go back from that. And it's funny, I was in a room, I'm going to say this alongside that, I was in a room of almost clones. And we can do that right in this industry. So again, it's same for recruitment. It's always about what are they going to bring? Is it going to be a point of difference? Are they owning who they are? Because that person, it will be a mirror for me to just remember who I am. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It does make sense. Yeah. And I just wanted to get your take on that because I think it can be challenging. And especially as you're trying to grow a company, of course, you don't want to be doing everything yourself forever. And of course, you're going to want people to help bring different opinions and new ideas to the table. And so, I just think it's good to highlight that and have a bit more clarity around it.
Yeah, but can
So,
I just add something, Emily? And
yeah.
I really want, this is so important. It's the capacity thing again. I used to believe this wasn't this year. This was like parts of my business. So I needed this and this, and I don't want to be doing this. And I don't want to be doing that. Fine. But what I actually realized was, again, my nervous system was like at capacity. And I was like, I can't do these things. And actually, when I looked at what I was doing, I wasn't actually maybe doing much. So what I realized was, I had a capacity issue. I didn't have a recruitment issue. So again, I needed to look at that. Like there's very little help now that I need in my business. I have the energy and the vibrancy to do this stuff. I
Yeah.
didn't have that before. Don't get me wrong. There's zones of genius that are not mine that I don't want. But there's also stuff that wasn't true. It was just a story that I told myself so that I could outsource it because fundamentally on a health level, there was something going on with my ability to be able to hold more. And I think that's the most important thing in this conversation because a lot of us don't see the red flags that way either.
Yeah. No, I love that. And so as you started to shift and kind of move out of 2023 into more of the present day, what have been some of the biggest tools, obviously shadow work, but what have been some of the biggest tools that have helped you kind of reclaim your power, step into who you really are, break through that box, and get back to your most vibrant, most abundant self?
I tap, I'm a tapper. So I do very unorthodox tapping, Emily. And
Okay.
so it can be quite shocking for people, but it's really effective and it works. So I tap a lot. I do a lot of nervous system regulation. I do, have kind of like a very tiny breathwork routine every day. And that's it. I don't have any strict, you see people, these strict mornings and these
Yeah.
strict, like, I don't have that because it just didn't work for me. And I continue, like, at the end of every week to have a remembrance session with myself. And when I say the word remembrance, even I'm getting teary just saying that, because we just get on with our weeks, get through it. We might celebrate a few things. And what I do is I write a journal, and it's like my remembrance day. And it could be Friday or Saturday, and I will just remember who I was that week. So it's not my accolades, it's not my things, it's not my client results. It's actually who she was being and how she helped me to achieve my future state, or she's helping me to achieve my future state. And I congratulate her, because for a very long period of time, she was shut in that box. She wasn't congratulated, even though she'd helped me achieve so much. And yet I couldn't see it. And so I feel like I'm in this season, and actually a lot of my clients we are just remembering who we are. We are reclaiming who we are, who we came here to be. We are not listening anymore to anything else. The headphones are like out. This is not about consumption anymore, listening. It's literally about intuitively being enough in the shoes that you are today and just being okay with that. And I feel like I've been given a second life, and I'm so okay with that.
So good. So, one of the questions I've been wanting to ask you for a while now is around wealth creation and sales. And you and I are both, we love high ticket sales. We love helping people make a lot of money. I'm curious to know your thoughts on whether someone should ever do something just for the money.
Uh, is this a trick question, Emily?
I know what you're going to say, and there's a reason why I'm asking it. So, obviously, that's no.
So the answer is
Um,
no. And the
yeah,
indicator for me as well is pressure. Is this going to cause me pressure? If this, whatever it is going to put, and I'm not talking about good pressure. We know the pressure I'm talking about, where it's actually, this is inherently probably wrong. And I call it selling your soul for money, or selling a pound of flesh. And so
yeah,
if this is going to cause you to sell a pound of flesh, then the answer is no.
right. And the reason I'm asking this is because I know many people listening to this, maybe some of your clients as well, are in this period of transition where they have a business and they need to pay the bills. Like there's real expenses that need to be taken care of. And yet they haven't yet gotten the clarity, or they haven't yet built the thing that feels like the legacy work. And so, what do you do in the interim to either create something that is aligned or shift your energy, or what is the answer in that kind of in between period before you're on the other side?
I think it depends who you are, because I'm very much like, if straight away my system kind of shuts down. I don't know what you're like, Emily, but like the integrity switch just is like, I mean, it's sharp because it's felt it,
Yeah.
right? It's felt before. And so there's two ways of looking at this. One way is you continue doing what you're doing as long as you're still bringing people results and you're happy doing that in that way. And then I always say to people, it's your responsibility to be as quick as you can to get back into whatever mission seat you are. And the thing is, what most people do is they don't do that. They just play in this like limbo energy space. So like there's the old state, this is the new state, and they're just playing in this middle state. And so I don't believe that you have to keep doing this for a long time before you do this, because that's just not how we create our future state. We can do it like in an instant. What I believe is you just need to get really clear on your standards, your values, who you're going to stand for right now, and you start building from there. It doesn't mean you can't still serve. It doesn't mean you have to cut cords immediately. It might do if actually it is feeling really icky and it really isn't aligned, absolutely. But it just means that you still get to operate from here, knowing that you've already moved into who she is now. And the quicker you move into that state, you kind of skip this middle state. You start operating from your future state, which is your current state, and everything will start dropping in. And so when I go through a change, a pivot, which obviously I have done a few times, I start to get really super intentional about how it gets to be going forward, what my new level of standards are, who I get to work with, who comes into my energy. And it's not like an overnight one and done, but the universe starts to catch up. But we are responsible for behaving in line with those standards and behaviors and everything else that we say that we want. And I find that when we don't do that, that's when we're just in that limbo state for way too long. And I've been there too. It's horrible.
Yeah. And what is it when you say we're responsible? Like, what does that look like tangibly for you to kind of adopt this new way of being? And you said we're responsible for the behavior. What does that look like?
For me, it's just starting to make decisions. Most people won't make the decision. They won't step forward. They're saying they are, but they're not. And it's like, I don't know if this is the right thing right now. Nobody does. Like, when we're building the impossible, it's not from the practical, logical. It's in another sphere. And this impossible is not getting built from, I'm going to move forward with a decision because I know that the end result is going to be X. No pioneer knows that. So as pioneers and leaders, we have to just put our foot forward and say, I'm moving into this new space. I literally have no idea what's going to happen next. And every day I'm just going to keep putting one foot forward, one foot forward, one foot forward. But this is in this new energy over here, not in the old energy here. And that's you aligning your behaviors. You're already her, you're already doing it.
Yeah. And when you get clear on what that new version of her looks like, is that you writing it down, or like what are the steps that you take to make sure to start to adopt that?
So first things first is just to be clear to anyone here. I have had periods in my time where I knew I needed to pivot or move, and I had no idea what that looked like. Like, I had no vision. I was like, I don't have any anchor. But how can I not have an anchor? Because I'm being told to move, but yet I don't know what I'm doing. So if you're just listening and you're like, oh my God, are you always clear? I'm not. What I will say is the pivot that I'm just doing now, I had no vision. I mean, I was telling my clients, they were like, well, how do you move when? I was like, because I'm just moving. I'm trusting that, I don't know where I'm going. I can't see a picture. I don't see this, like the angels haven't come down and gifted me today.
Yeah.
And so all I kept doing was I had a feeling that it was not the right thing. It was over here and I had a feeling it was in this area. And so I just started doing things in that area. And funny enough, the more footsteps that I put forward gave me clarity. And what I find is a lot of people say, I'm not clear, and they're not clear because they won't make the first move. And it's our responsibility to make the first move, I think, is what I'm saying, Emily, because most people are like, well, I'll do this when I can see this evidence. Well, no, you won't, because you've got to be the evidence. And so you've got to do it first, and then everything will respond to you. But everyone thinks if I do the thing, get the thing, then I'll see the thing. And actually, it doesn't work like that. So I think what I'm saying is when you can't see, you're still responsible for intuitively listening, because you already know, you already know, and getting so quiet to, even if it's a tiny movement today, it's like, what would you show me? I go, what would you have me do today? What is being guided through me right now? What is it that I need to be doing? And I get really quiet, and the message will come. And a really good thing, by the way, this is a technique I use with all my clients when they're like, I'm not clear, I don't know. And I say, well, you do. And if you were a woman of clarity right now in this moment in time, what would she be doing? And straight away they're like, oh, I'd do this. Great.
Yeah.
Because being unclear is just it's a narrative. It's just a story.
Totally.
We've got used to being able to get off the hook with that one. And so that helps too when I'm not clear.
Thank you for that. Yeah. And even coming back to what we talked about in the beginning of this conversation, so much about that clarity is giving yourself permission, because you do know. But how often are we saying, oh, I need to wait for that, or that's not possible, or I couldn't do that, or whatever. And if you just gave yourself permission to take that action, even if it's just one step that day, like you said, we always have like the cart before the horse scenario, but you need to be the one to give yourself that evidence. I love how you put that. So good.
You are the evidence.
Yeah. So good. All right. So I have one final question that I ask all my guests here on the I Heart My Life show. I know that we could literally talk for another few hours, but we're going to wrap it up because this has been so good and juicy. So what is one way that people can create a life that's better than their dreams and far exceeds their wildest expectations?
I feel like the one way you get to do all of this is building the most incredible relationship with yourself. That's it. Like, nothing else matters, because you are the ripple, you are the legacy. And You can build what you think is extraordinary all you want. And trust me, I've done it. I've had it. And when you're sat there thinking, this doesn't feel good. Why doesn't this feel like I thought? Why isn't this relationship feel like this? And why isn't this house feel like this? And because actually it was never about that. It was always about building an extraordinary relationship with yourself so that you're at peace and you're calm and you can be present with your children and actually just take in this precious life that we've all been gifted. And if
Yeah.
I'd have known that sooner, I would have worked on the relationship with self a hell of a lot.
Mm, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Suzie. We'll link your website, and I know you have your newsletter below, and people can also follow you on Instagram. What's your name on there?
It's just Suzie Cuthbertson.
Thank you so much for this. I've loved this conversation. I've learned so much from you, not just from this conversation, but all of our interactions. So I hope people go and follow you and learn from you, work with you, all the things, because you are so powerful and you're such a gift to me and our community. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily.
Thank you for listening to the I Heart My Life show. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with 3 friends or post about it on social media using the hashtag I Heart My Life show. And don't forget to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. It really does help us spread the movement far and wide. Remember, everything you desire is possible. Keep believing in your dreams and taking action.